You know, San Francisco has long been known as a cultural destination. And dance, well, there are few places in the world, certainly in the United States, with a stronger dance community. Tonight, two of its wonderful representatives, Erin Mei-Ling Steuart from EmSpace and Kat Cole from Detour. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, how strong a dance community does San Francisco and the Bay Area have?
I think that despite the many changes happening in San Francisco, we still have an incredibly strong dance community. We were just talking earlier about the fact that there are many shows happening every single weekend of the year. I've been overwhelmed with shows that I both need to see and should see. So I'm amazed, actually, at the kind of vibrancy of our community, even in the face of some hardship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that hardship. I mean, I've been here almost 30 years, and I mean, not to diminish anything that's going on, but it seems like there's always peaks and valleys, and oh my God, we can't afford to live here for artists or dancers or whatnot. Is what we're going through now different, and does it feel different, and how is it impacting you as a choreographer and a dance professional?
I feel like, well, as one of the artists who does live in the East Bay, out of necessity now, I think, it's interesting. I mean, there are now a lot of my friends who have kind of had to move elsewhere because it's, it's just hard to live here. But San Francisco still continues to be a hub. And we might live in the East Bay, but are here every day in San Francisco because the community remains vibrant.
Right. So leaving aside the issue of cost, which is potent, is the creative spirit that made the San Francisco dance scene unique, is that still feeding choreographers and feeding artists and feeding dance spaces?
I think it is. The difference that I see, I've been making dances in San Francisco for approaching 20 years, and the thing that I see that feels a little bit different between my generation of choreographers and Kat's is that we could really flail around 20 years ago, It's like rent was $250 and you worked some crappy job, and then you just sort of tried to figure things out, and you can make a lot of mistakes, and I feel like young artists now have to be so on top of it, and not only trying to achieve your artistic vision, but at the same time have 4 jobs in order to survive and be so savvy in order to just make it all happen. And I think that by its nature might make things slightly less experimental than they could be, but I think that San Francisco does really still have a little bit of maverick artist spirit.
Right. The tech community has both been maligned and praised for making San Francisco kind of, what it is. How does the dance community, the live, quote-unquote, performing arts, interact with what's going on technologically in San Francisco? To Erin's point, maybe 20 years ago you could rehearse and, you didn't have your mistake in choreography up on YouTube or Facebook right. in 5 minutes, and now you've probably got people tweeting in, second position. Right?
That's an interesting question. How the tech community comes into...
I think tech is in our lives, but I think that it's actually been a nice tool for dance in terms of like giving people more of an idea of what it is that we do. Things like So You Think You Can Dance. It doesn't necessarily represent what we do, but it's made it so that households have a concept of contemporary dance.
So you think that's fine?
I think it's great. And I think that the struggles with the little bits of technology that are in all of our lives are the same struggles that everyone has in terms of presence and focus and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe the work that you do at Detour? Would you describe it as experimental?
I would describe it as interdisciplinary. So I think there's a little bit of that desire to take risks, but there's also this interest in how kind of different formal modes of performance can come together. So, they're interdisciplinary, there's dance, there's theater, there's song.
And maybe technology and maybe some film.
And technology. We've made films before. Yeah, there's an openness to that kind of influence.
Well, let's take a look. We have some examples of some work you've both done. So let's take a look, and then we want to come back and talk about an event you all are doing in December.
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter common to all primates, and we are primates. A flood of dopamine is associated with feelings of euphoria. This is how cocaine, amphetamines, methamphetamines all work. Dopamine is all about the pleasure of a reward. At least, that's what people used to think. Okay, so you're a monkey trained to do some task. A signal light goes on in your room, and that means, okay, this task is about to begin. And you've learned that if you do this task, you'll get a reward after a delay.
So we see all kinds of, to your point, interdisciplinary. You see some classic kind of modern dance in there. You see a lot of humor with the actor whose name escapes me from Mugwumpen.
Christopher Ward-White.
You know, and we see you, what was it, loving the spotlight? Or your character
literally.
loving the spotlight? How difficult is it to choreograph for someone who's a friend, a colleague?
Oh, I think it's great. It's and I think I've been in the recent Detour process, and it's a pretty collaborative process. So we're all sort of friends and colleagues and working together and creating together. And I think one thing that San Francisco dance companies tend to all, not all, but often share as a feature is that kind of collaborative way of working. It's a little bit more egalitarian maybe than some traditional dance companies.
So the good days are still here. So when I hear people read articles bemoaning the fact that, oh, the arts community is all moving to Utah or someplace cheaper, it's not all true.
Somehow we're still doing it. I'm not totally sure how, but we are.
Right. Now, you've got an event coming up in December that you're both working on. Tell me a little bit about that, Kat.
Yeah, it's a shared evening. So Erin is making a piece called Weather to Weather, and Detour Dance is making a piece called Beckon. And it's going to be a great night. It's going to be at No Space Theater, which is in the Project Artaud building from December 4th.
It's like very, very close to our studios, like 17th in Florida.
Right around the corner.
Yeah, walking distance. So yeah, it's going to run for 2 weeks, which is great. And anything else about that? December 4th through the 18th?
13th.
Yeah. And
December 4th
weather
through
to weather, I mean, am I reading anything to this title? Is this a climate change piece?
It is a kind of a subtly sideways climate change piece. There's a storyline for that's sort of a play inside of there's a dance and a play that are kind of interweaved, and the play is a couple that is going through kind of stranger and stranger weather disasters. It starts in a drought, which of course is very current for all of us here in California, and they go through a hurricane, which is also strangely topical, and then they get into these sort of more magical, realistic things where the sky breaks into stripes and there's falling ash. It really comes down to being a piece about relationships and how people relate and connect and don't connect,
Right.
but the kind of bed of all of that is changing seasons and bizarre weather. So I do sort of hope that people, it might bring climate change to mind, but it's not really specifically about that.
Got it. Last question for each of you. You know, there was a time when people were dancers, or they were performance artists, or they were singers. What do you call yourself? And are you a dancer, or are you a dance artist or a theater artist? I'll ask each of that.
A general artist. Kind of the dance and theater and song are all tools, but they kind of serve the same purpose. So
I still identify sort of with my first love of dance as a dancer and choreographer, but lately I just extend the list. It's dancer, choreographer, actor, director, musician, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Well, thank you both for being on. As long as you both are here, I'm sure San Francisco will still maintain its reputation for dance leadership. Thanks so much.
Thanks, David.
We've been speaking to Erin and Kat. Next up, another type of art form, quote-unquote stagecraft. We speak with Greg Backstrom about what's going on at the very historic Curran Theater in downtown San Francisco. We'll be right back.